What's going on, guys? Today we're going to unit test our application by mocking some components in order to isolate the modules that we want to test. And I created a Golang cheat sheet that you can download from pragmaticreviews.com. There is a link in the description below. On a previous video, we refactored our API to implement a clean architecture approach. So we created all these interfaces. We created an HTTP router interface, a post controller interface, a post service interface, and a post repository interface. We created a router interface, so our application is independent of the HTTP framework. We created two implementations for the router interface, one using Max and other using Chi. But we can also create our own implementation of that router interface. This HTTP router delegates the requests to the controller layer, and the controller collaborates with the service layer, and the service layer is the place where the business logic is implemented. The service layer interacts with the repository. This repository could be a Firestore database, MongoDB, MySQL, DynamoDB, Postgres, or any other database. This repository could be also a mock repository, and that's what we are going to use to isolate our post service in order to test it. And we are going to use Testify to create the mock repository that is going to be an implementation of the post repository interface. Remember to share, like, and subscribe to the channel, and let's get started. Okay, this is the application that we've been working on the previous video. And here is the service that we created. Basically, we implemented this post service interface with these three methods: validate, create, and find all. So we are going to create tests for all these three implementations. So here we have the validate implementation, here is the create implementation, and here is the find all implementation. We are going to start our test by doing a test for this method, and then we are going to move on these two. For the first one, we are not going to use any mocking, but for this, we are going to mock the repo. And here we are using the save function from the repo, and here we are using the find all function from the repo. So in these two cases, we're going to need to mock the repository, and in this case, we don't need to mock anything. Okay, let's create a new file. This is going to be the unit test file, and the naming convention here is _test.go. So in this case, it's going to be post service _test.go. And we are going to use the same package. That's going to be service. And here we are going to start adding our tests. The first test is going to be for the validate method, actually this method here. And we have two cases here. When we receive an empty post or a nil as the post argument, and when we receive an empty title like this. So we are going to create two test cases, one for each scenario. So the first one is going to be test validate empty post. Func test validate empty post. And here we need to import the testing library from Golang, like this. Import testing, like that. And here we need to pass a reference to that library. So this is going to be T and the reference, testing.t, like that. So first we need an instance of the service. I'm going to create a variable here, test service, and I'm going to assign it to the quote-unquote constructor function, that is new post service. And I'm not going to pass any repository. Remember that. Let's go to that function. And remember that we need to pass the repository here. I'm going to pass nil because we are not using it within this method. Okay, and now I'm going to call the validate method. This validate method, let's go back again. This validate method is going to return an error in case the post is empty or nil, or if the title is empty. So the service that validate, and we're going to pass nil. So in this case, we are passing an empty post or a nil post. And here what I need to do is I need to add the assertions. So I'm going to use the assert package from the Testify library. So the Testify library will allow us to use not only the mock package to create mocks, but also the assert package to create assertions on the data. So I'm going to install it. This is go get, and the location is github.com/stretcher/testify. Stretcher, like that. Okay, now that we have that library installed, I'm going to import it. First, I'm going to import the assert package. And I'm going to use it here, assert. And within this package, I get a bunch of methods to make assertions. I get equal, equal error, equal values, exactly, fail, false, file exists, a lot of methods. I'm going to use not nil, and I need to pass two arguments, the test library, and I'm going to pass the error, because in this case I know that, or I expect to receive this error. And now I'm going to add another assertion on this message. So this is going to be assert that equal, and I need to pass the testing library, the error, that is error that I need to use the error function here. This returns the message, the error message, and then the message that I expect. I'm going to save this, and I'm going to run it, and the test is passing. Okay, if I, let's say that I change this message, and I run this again, this should fail. Yes, it fails because this is what is expected, and this is what I am, no, this is actually like this. First, the expected value, and then the actual value, like that. I'm going to run this again, and yes, it fails because the expected value is this one, the one that we entered here, and this is the actual value, that is the result of this, of the evaluation of this function here. So if I change this, and I run this again, now the test passed. Okay, and now I'm going to create another test that is going to validate the title. So I'm going to use an empty title in my post, and this should throw an error, actually this error, this message. The post title is empty. So let's do that. Okay. And here I'm going to create a post. Let's go back to the entity and let's see the struct. So the struct has three attributes: an identifier, a title, and a text. So I'm going to create that. This is entity that post. And here I need to pass identifier. It's going to be 1. The title title that I'm going to keep it empty, and the text is going to be B, let's say. Okay, now I'm going to create a service. I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to call the validate function again, like this. But in this case, I'm going to pass the post, like that. Now I'm going to create two assertions, like these two. I'm going to copy this. And again, I'm going to expect that the error is not nil. And in this case, I'm going to change the expected value of the error message because it's different. In this case is, sorry, let's go back to the service. In this case is the post title is empty. I'm going to grab this and I'm going to change the expected value by that error message. Okay, I'm going to run this test and I get an error. Why? Yeah, because this is a reference to the post. Yes. Now I'm going to run this again and the test passes. Okay, and now let's change the expected value and let's run this again. And yes, we get an error because we are expecting a message that is different from the one that we received, that is the post title is empty. I'm going to change it again. I'm going to run it and this is going to pass. Okay, great. Okay, now we are going to create our mock repository. So we need to import the mock package from Testify, like this. And first we need to create a structure, and this structure, this mock repository structure, is going to implement the post repository interface, actually this one. So first let's create the struct type mock repository struct. And here I'm going to use a structure provided by the Testify framework, that is this one, mock.mock. And here I need to implement these two functions. So I'm going to grab this. I'm going to copy this here. And now I'm going to implement these functions. So this is going to be mock repository, and this needs to be a reference. I'm going to capitalize the first letter here, like that. Okay. And the same for the final function. I'm going to copy this here. Okay. And here, what we need to do is actually stub these functions, returning the arguments that we receive. And how can we do that? So the arguments, we can access those arguments by using mock.called, and this is going to return the arguments. And now what we need to do is we need to return from this function the arguments that we receive. So in this case, the first argument is going to be the post. So basically we can access the first argument like this, args.get, and the index is going to be 0. So that's the first argument. And we are going to return that result. And we need to make a type assertion here that is going to be entity.post. like that. And the second argument that we need to return is going to be an error, right? We need to return the post, and we need to return the error. That in this case is going to be args.error, and we need to pass 1. We save this, and that's pretty much all we need. And the find all function is going to be the same. We need to receive the arguments and return those arguments. So I'm going to copy this. And the only thing that changes is this. We don't return a reference to a post, but we return a post array. Let's start by testing the find all function. Actually, let's go to the service. This is the one that we are going to test. So we are going to call this method, and we're going to create an expectation on the mock repository to call this function. So let's do that. This is going to be func test find all. And here we need to pass the testing library. And first, we are going to create a variable that is going to be the mock repository, mock repo. And here we are going to create a new reference to that repository. It's going to be new, and this is going to be mock repository, like that. And now we are going to set up the expectation. Set up expectations, and we're going to say that we expect that our mock repo, when the find all method is called, what I mean is here on the repo we have the find all interface. So when this method is called, that is implemented here by this mock, we expect to return an array. So this is going to return an array of posts and nil as the error. And here we need to pass one element, so I'm going to create a post to add it to this array. I'm going to grab this one. And I'm going to assign a title A, let's say. And I'm going to pass it here, post. When the find all method is invoked on this mock repo, is going to return an array, including this post element here. And it's going to also return nil as the error. Okay, now let's create the service. It's going to be test service, new post service. And here we are going to pass the mock repository as a parameter. And now we are going to call the find all function from this service. And here we expect a result. And we're going to ignore the error. And here I'm going to create some assertions. The first one is going to be an assertion on the expectation that we created here. So this is going to be mock repo that assert expectations, and we need to pass the reference to the test library. So this is a mock assertion. So this is behavioral. And then we are going to create a data assertion. There's going to be assert that equal. And here we pass the test. We are going to pass the result. That in this case is an array, so we're going to get the first element of this array, and we're going to use the title. But first we need to pass the expected value, that is going to be A in this case. And the same for the rest of the attributes, right? We expect B as the text, and we expect 1 for the identifier. I forgot to add a comma here, here, and here. Let's save this. Okay, I'm going to create a variable here. It's going to be var identifier int 64 equals 1, and this is going to be identifier, and here I'm going to add the same in the assertion, identifier, like that. And let's run this test. No, I need to remove this actually. And let's run this test. And now the test passes. Great. Okay, so the assertion is passing. So when I call this final function of the test service, is calling the mock repository. And once we get the result, that is actually an array including this post, we are doing the assertion on each of these attributes. We expect the identifier to be 1, the title to be A, and the text to be B. Let's debug this test so we can see the details on how it runs. Okay, now we are on the first line. This is the reference to the testing library that we receive here, and this is the mock repo. So let's move on to the next line. Here I assign the identifier, here is the value, and here I create the post variable, and here I can see the values that I assign to that structure. And now we're going to see that we are going to assign this final expectation. So I'm going to move on to the next line. And here is our expectation on the method final. I'm going to move this so we can see it better. But here is the method, here's the argument. Yes, we are calling the final method with no arguments. That's why this nil value here. And the return arguments are going to be, the first one is going to be the post title, actually an array with one element. And the other one is going to be nil. That is going to be the empty error or the nil error. Let's move on. And now we should have only one element, that is actually this post with these attributes. Okay, let's move on. And now we have one as the identifier, and here we have one of the first. In the first position of this array, we have this post, and the identifier for that element is 1, the same that we have here. And the title is A, and the text is B. So I'm going to move on, and that's pretty much. I'm going to forward this, and the test is going to pass again. Okay, I'm going to close this. Let's go back. Let's remove this breakpoint. And now I'm going to create a new test for the create method. If we go to a service, we need to create a test for this function. Okay, let's go back. And I'm going to call it func test create. And here, as usual, we need to pass the testing argument, like this. We are going to use the mock repository. We are going to use a post, because we need to pass the post to that repo. And here we set up the expectations on the mock repo that on, and here we need to pass the name of the function that is save. If we go to the repository interface, we're going to see that this is the function that we need to mock, the save function. That is actually this one here. This is the implementation in our mock repository. Let's go back. When the save function of the mock repository is invoked, this is going to return the post, actually a reference to the post, and nil as error, like that. And now we need to create our test service again. That is the service that we are testing. And we pass the mock repo again. And I forgot to add the identifier here. Okay, now we're good. I need to call the create function of the test service. We need to use the service that create, and we are going to pass the post. We need to pass a reference to the post, actually. And here, if we go to the definition of the interface, this is going to return a post and an error, so we need to handle both result, and we're going to ignore the error. We're not going to use it. And here we need to add the assertions. So the assertion for the mock repository is going to be mock repo that assert expectations, and we're going to pass the test. And then we are going to do some data assertion, assert that equal, and we're going to pass the test. We're going to pass the expected value. In this case, we can test the identifier. For example, we expect this value from result.id. And we can do the same for the rest of the attributes. So we expect A as the title, and we expect B as the text of this post. Okay, and we can also add another assertion. Let's assign a variable here, and we can make an assertion on that variable. Let's say that assert that nil, and we pass the error because we expect this error to be nil. Yeah, I forgot to add the test, like that. Okay, let's run this one. Okay, here I forgot that the identifier is a random identifier that is generated here on the service. If we go to the service, if we go to the save, actually to the create method, this is going to call this random function. So we can do two things. We can mock that library, that's one option, and we set the value that we expect when we call this method. That's one option. And the other option is changing the assertion. I'm going to do that. I'm going to change the assertion, and I'm going to expect a not nil value. Not nil, like this, not nil, like that. And I'm going to expect that the identifier that is generated by the run library is not null. So I'm going to run this again. I'm going to remove this. Actually, I need to only pass the title and the text here. And I'm going to run this. And now the test should pass. Great, yes. Now we know that the identifier is generated, and that's pretty much all I have for today. Thank you for watching, and I see you guys in the next video. Take care. Bye.